the 21st of September, 1939. Barely 6 weeks since the German invasion of Poland, the Nazis take over Warsaw and start systematically targeting the Polish intelligentsia. Politicians, scholars, artists, clergy, and members of the resistance are rounded up in the name of political repression. They are sent en masse on trucks out of the city for transfers to some other prison. Rather, their final destination is a distant forest outside the tiny village of Palmieri, some 30 kilometers northwest of Warsaw, where mass graves have been dug beforehand. There, women and men are marched to the edge in line, executed by being shot in the back of the head, and buried en masse. Between 1939 and 1941, over 1,700 individuals will be killed in this fashion. These murders turn out to be the Palmieri massacre, the most notorious of the Nazi crimes in occupied Poland. The crime won't go unpunished, and the leaders of this crime will pay for their guilt with their lives. The terror began before Palmieri was turned into a mass execution site, though, in the city of Warsaw. Warsaw had been for many years considered by Nazi leaders to be among the greatest hindrances to their strategy of dominating the Polish state. To them, it was not simply another location on a map, but the heart and center of Poland's political, intellectual, and cultural existence. The capital city boasted over 900 schools and universities of all kinds and levels, some 200 museums, archives, libraries, theaters and cinemas, and over 900 houses of worship of various religions. Over 50% of the country's press circulation was published in Warsaw, and the university lecturers and students numbered around 40% of the population of the whole country. After the September 1, 1939, German invasion of Poland, the capital city of Warsaw was deprived of its prestige and demoted to a provincial city of the newly organized general government. Still, it continued to be the pulsating heart of Polish culture and the capital of the Polish underground state, soon becoming a base of armed and political resistance. Years after, on the 14th of December 1943, Hans Frank, chief of the German-occupied portion of Poland, the general government, recorded in his diary, "There is one place in this country which is a source of all our misfortunes. It is Warsaw. Without Warsaw, we would not have 4/5 of the trouble we are facing now. Warsaw is the center of all agitation, the city out of which discontent is disseminated throughout the nation." The capital of Poland had capitulated to the Germans on the 28th of September 1939. Barely 3 days later, SS Brigade Führer Lothar Bortel and his Einsatzgruppe IV, a Nazi mobile killing unit, arrived in the city. Public and private edifices were scoured, and massive arrests commenced almost at once. On the 8th of October 1939, 354 Polish teachers and Catholic priests were arrested for having Polish chauvinism and endangering public order. Soon, Warsaw's prisons like Powiat, Mokotów, the central detention center on Daniło-Buczowska Street, and the Gestapo headquarters at 25 Suka Avenue were full. Prisoners were sent to concentration camps, and others were shot. During the first months of occupation, political prisoners were secretly executed in the gardens behind the Polish parliament. From October 1939 to April 1940, hundreds of victims were killed there. But conducting executions in the center of Warsaw very quickly became impossible to conceal. The Nazis required a location where mass executions could be performed in secret, and for this reason, they chose a remote glade deep in the forest close to Palmieri village. After that, the killings were conducted with macabre efficiency. Soldiers from the 1st SS Totenkopf-Verbändet Cavalry Regiment, based in Warsaw, and members of the Order Police, worked as the main executioners. They were monitored by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret policemen, under the command of SS Standartenführer Joseph Meisinger, the security service and security police chief in Warsaw. The mass graves were prepared beforehand, typically by Reich Labor Service or Hitler Youth men. The ditches could be more than 30 meters long and almost 3 meters deep, although smaller, irregularly shaped graves were also made for groups of less than 100. The forest clearing was extended incrementally, and on working days the local foresters were provided with a day off. German police controlled the area intensively to keep any witnesses away. The majority of the victims were transported from Powiat prison, loaded onto trucks under the cover of being taken to another prison, or being deported to a concentration camp. Prisoners were permitted to carry personal items, in some cases even extra food, and even return their papers. In the initial months, this ruse proved effective, and numerous victims did not become aware of their destiny until the very end. Subsequently, with the news of Palmary spreading in Warsaw, some prisoners attempted to drop letters or personal items from the trucks to inform their relatives. When exhumed after the war, some corpses had attached notes with the inscription, "Executed in Palmary," written before death. Victims' bags were seized at the site, although they were occasionally permitted to retain documents or personal belongings. Jews retained the Yellow Star of David badge, and Red Cross badges of Powiat infirmary personnel were discovered on others. Others had their hands bound and eyes blinded. Victims were lined up against the lip of the grave and shot, frequently with machine guns. Some were made to stand holding a pole or ladder behind their backs so that they fell into the grave in an even layer. Some were buried alive, according to post-war investigation. The Nazis tried to cover up these atrocities. The graves were filled in, topped with moss and needles, and covered over with young pines. Relatives were informed that their loved ones had died of natural causes. Secrecy, however, was impossible. Local residents, particularly forest employees, observed the cortege of prisoners and heard the sounds of gunfire. At risk of their own lives, forester Adam Herbanski and his team mapped the sites of the graves and reported them to the Polish underground. Several of the photographs taken by the executioners themselves were also pilfered by members of the resistance, saving the truth for history. German policy was aimed against members of Polish political and intellectual life. The ordinary people were deemed useful only as unskilled workers, while the intelligentsia was thought to be the sole section of society with national consciousness. By eliminating the elites, the Germans aimed at annihilating Poland's national identity and subordinating the remaining population to a passive mass. The Nazis understood this intelligentsia comprehensively. It wasn't just for those who had formal schooling, but for anybody who exerted respect, influence, or leadership in society. They called this targeted category the Polish leadership class. The biggest and most notorious Palmary execution was on 20 and the 21st of June 1940. 3 transports of 358 prisoners from Powiat arrived during 2 days. Among them were some of the most famous representatives of Polish political, cultural and social life. The martyrs were Maciej Retage, a former Speaker of the Sejm, the lower chamber of the Polish Parliament, socialist activist Mieczysław Niedziałkowski, Halina Jaroszewiczowa, and other parliamentarians, District Governor Ludomir Skorowiec, and noted intellectuals Jan Belczykowski. Lawyers, journalists, artists and industrialists were killed in cold blood. The famous Olympic champion Janusz Kusacinski was also brutally killed. As many as 82 women were killed in this massacre alone. The magnitude of the loss was tremendous, and the purpose was clear: destroying the leadership class of Poland. Governor-General Hans Frank formally announced the Aktion on the 23rd of July 1940, declaring it finished, the goal being to remove the intellectuals and higher classes of Poland. The massacre at Palmyry was a part of this action, although in actuality, the Palmyry massacres did not cease. Executions were ongoing in 1940 and into 1941 in smaller numbers, but with the same intent: terrorizing, intimidating, and systematically eliminating individuals who might spark resistance. The last verified execution in Palmyry occurred on the 17th of July 1941. Some facts are unclear because a number of transports were lost with no remnant, but indications are that the summer of 1941 represented the conclusion of Palmyry as an execution point. The principal cause was confidentiality. By this time, those crimes had ceased being kept secret. The name Palmary was first mentioned in the underground press. Polish underground reports explained the murders in vivid details. Resistance intelligence even succeeded in getting a few photographs taken by German executioners themselves. These horrific pictures were eventually smuggled to London. Following the war, Palmary was one of the first of the Nazi crime sites to be investigated by the Polish authorities. Herbanski and the other foresters, whose lives were placed in danger, marked the site of the mass graves, making it possible for exhumations to be carried out. Hundreds of bodies were dug up from the sandy forest ground. Most were blindfolded, hands bound, unmistakable signs of execution. Today, the Palmyry Cemetery and Museum stand as a memory to the almost 1,700 individuals who were killed there between 1939 and 1941. While many of those guilty of the Palmyra massacre never stood trial, in a few instances, justice, or perhaps even revenge, eventually caught up with them. The first of these was SS Gruppenführer Paul Modder. He was SS and police leader Warsaw District in 1940-1941, and officially in command of the subunits, which were executing persons. He was killed on the Eastern Front in February 1942. Ludwig Fischer, governor of the Warsaw District, who commanded the terror campaign, was convicted of death by the Supreme National Tribunal in Warsaw, and in March 1947, executed. A prominent figure was Joseph Meisinger, commander of the German security police and SD in Warsaw, between late 1939 and early 1941. The Butcher of Warsaw, he was a direct participant in the ABA and personally accountable for the transports that culminated in the Palmyra mass graves. Similar to Fischer, he was convicted to death by the Supreme National Tribunal in 1947 and executed by hanging. Justice also overtook Hans Frank, the leader of the general government. Following the war, Frank was tried in the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, convicted on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and executed by hanging on the 16th of October 1946. In the 5 years of Nazi rule, some 6 million Polish citizens were killed. Thank you for watching World History Channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tap the bell notification symbol so you don't miss our next videos. We appreciate you. And until next time, on the channel.